Good morning. Today's reading is from the book of Matthew, chapter 10, verses 24 through 39. A student is not greater than his teacher. A servant is not above his master. The student shares his teacher's fate. The servant shares his master's. And since I, the master of the household, have been called Satan, how much more will you? But don't be afraid of those who threaten you, for the time is coming when the truth will be revealed. Their secret plots will become public information. What I tell you now in the gloom, shout abroad when daybreak comes. What I whisper in your ears, proclaim from the housetops. Don't be afraid of those who can kill only your bodies, but can't touch your souls. Fear only God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Not one sparrow can fall to the ground without your Father knowing it, and the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't worry, you are more valuable to him than many sparrows. If anyone publicly acknowledges me as his friend, I will openly acknowledge him as my friend before my Father in heaven. But if anyone publicly denies me, I will openly deny him before my Father in heaven. Don't imagine that I came to bring peace to the earth. No, rather a sword. I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's worst enemies will be right in his own home. If you love your father and mother more than you love me, you are not worthy of being mine. Or if you love your son or daughter more than me, you are not worthy of being mine. If you refuse to take up your cross and follow me, you are not worthy of being mine. If you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you give it up for me, you will save it. The word of God for everyone.
Thanks be to God. God, help us to be open to hearing your word for us, whatever that might be for each of us. And may the words of my lips and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, you who are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
There's a story about two little boys who were asked to, by their mom, to chase a chicken snake out of the hen house. And they were not afraid or anything. They looked everywhere for that snake, however, and they kept looking and looking and looking, and they couldn't seem to spot it. And the more they looked, the more afraid they got at what they might find, until finally they did find it. And when that happened, the kids were so startled by it that they took off running away and never took care of the snake. And their mother said, don't you know a chicken snake won't hurt you? Yes, one of the boys said. But there are some things that will scare you so bad, you'll hurt yourself. There was a woman that became paranoid, true story, and very fearful of her neighbors, fearful of the area she lived in, and she would stay in the house all the time. And she still was afraid. And so she asked her husband to put iron bars on the windows so nobody could break in. And an iron bar on the door so no one could break in. So that when he was away, she could slide the iron bar and be safe. Well, one afternoon she took a nap and a fire broke out. The firemen, the police, the neighbors, even her husband couldn't get into the house to save her. Some things will scare you so bad, you'll end up hurting yourself. There's a wonderful movie with lots of subplots in it, and I believe it won the Academy Award a number of years ago, Shawshank Redemption. And among some of the plots in it, one was about a character, Brooks Hatton, who was played by the actor James Whitmore. And here's how one character described Hatland in the film. The man's been in here 50 years. It's a prison story. Haywood, 50 years. This is all he knows. And here he's an important man. He's an educated man. Outside he's nothing. Just a used up con with arthritis in both hands. Probably couldn't get a library card if he tried. And yet he was a librarian in the prison. These walls are funny. First you hate them, then you get used to them. Enough time passes, it gets so you depend on them. That's institutionalized. They send you here for life, and that's exactly what they take. The part that counts, anyway. The truth of this comes home in the movie when Hatland is finally released. He discovers that he can't enjoy being free after 50 years in the prison. He's grown accustomed to the life with the constraints, and he has now to make his own decisions. Someone else did the thinking for him. Someone else prepared the meals. He may have worked preparing the meals, but someone else did it. And now, on the outside, he faces the prospect of trying to live. And it becomes overwhelming to him, terrifying. And he begins to think, if I could rob this store, this food waste store, I bet they'd put me back in the prison. And if I killed the manager, they'd have to give me, put me back in. And he sums up his dilemma in this line, and I quote, "It is a terrible thing to live in fear." And it is. One of the results of the terrorist attack was to make a lot of us live in fear in a different way from 9/11, way back. All of a sudden people are anxious about traveling. So many different things. And some of those securities that we grew up with, took for granted, all of a sudden weren't there anymore. It wasn't that easy to get around. And the terrorists win when we live in fear, if you will. Jesus said, gives us some clues on how we might be able to get a grip, if you will, on fear. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered by God. So don't be afraid, you're worth more than many sparrows. Or is there some of us here in worship today who might say, God is no big deal that you can count the number of hairs on our head. We can almost do that. And but we need to, in order to get a good perspective on fear is to face it with faith. And part of it is, of course, to know that fear is given to us by God. When I get afraid, my adrenaline gets going, and I can handle some situations I couldn't otherwise. One time my brother was working on a hayfield, out in the hayfield, and with another man, and the tractor tipped over on the other man. Now there's no way my 15-year-old brother could pick up that tractor, but he did. That's the activation of fear in a positive way. And it helps us, we put fear in our kids, don't we? I know there's at least one child of two parents here. And they, I'm sure, look both ways when you cross the street. And then look again, so that you'll be safe. And so many other things. We want our teenagers not to drive too fast. Fear was designed by God to give us energy at appropriate times. But it can also paralyze us. There's a cute story about a mother who was tucking her small son into bed during a thunderstorm. It had been cracking pretty good, and he was kind of shaky. And he said, "Mommy, would you sleep with me tonight?" And she said, "No, I can't," as she gave him a special hug. "I can't, dear. You know Mommy has to sleep with Daddy." And after a long pause, the child said in a shaky voice, "Yes, Daddy really is a sissy, isn't he?" Some years ago, a research scientist was looking at surgery, when surgery is done in the hospitals. And he discovered that those who were most fearful tended not to heal as quickly. But also those, interestingly, also those who had no fear did not heal quickly. And the ones that healed quicker were those who had a healthy understanding of the surgery, who asked the question, is it going to hurt? How long is it going to be before I get better? What's going to be going on? I mean, we can't always ask that. But those who had enough fear to ask the right questions, those were the ones that healed quicker after the surgery. Interesting. Facing the fear was more effective than denying it or saying, "I have no fear." Frederick Buechner, who's a writer and pastor, in a book called Telling Secrets, talks about the necessity of facing fears honestly. And he tells about it out of his own life. He said, "I grew up in a family where my father was an alcoholic. And I didn't really want to face that. But I knew that every time my dad went out to a party, he came home as somebody I didn't recognize. And he and my mother would just yell at one another, and she would yell at him. And the house would seemingly shake. And I always kept that hidden from myself. I denied it. And it was when I acknowledged that that was what was going on in my family. When I brought it to light, that was when I began to be healed. And if you know Frederick Buechner's story, he was a chaplain for many years up at Exeter Academy. He came home one day and his dad had killed himself by carbon monoxide. Facing our fears is bringing them to light. And Jesus said, being afraid of the right things or the wrong things. Dennis the Menace one time burst in, he had a big black eye in one of the cartoons, and somebody said, what happened? He said, my guardian angel left me. And there are times when you feel like your guardian angel has left you, that there are things that happen. And he said, I got in a fight, and the guardian angel, he just left. And our faith is that God doesn't leave. How great thou art, that he calls us, that he walks with us in the garden. That he's trampling out injustice. Years ago, there was a senior pastor at the historic Marble Collegiate Church in New York City. And he took a person into the church who was 88 years old. She was a remarkable woman. He said she was about 5 feet and just full of energy. And she lived to be 107. And he said during those years that she was there, she had broken bones, a broken toe from stumbling, a broken hip at 100 years of age. She was mugged on several occasions. She lost 2 sons during those years who died. And he was interested when she was 99, not knowing that she was going to make 100. He said, you have a remarkable spirit. What is it? What gives you that spirit? And Amelia, tell me, what has kept you living so long and remaining so vital? And she thought for a minute, and she said, I'll tell you what's given me this long life. I have learned how not to be afraid. She had learned how not to be afraid. She said, I believe that God is with me all the time, and that my model is a passage from Philippians by Paul. I can do all things through Christ who gives me the strength. That speaks to me. And that little lady had learned one of those great secrets, how not to be afraid. Jesus said, do not be afraid of those who can hurt your body, but not your soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy your soul and your body as well. And then are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? When those who heard that would know, they knew that 2 sparrows could be sold for 1 penny, and that would be the sacrifice in the temple for a poor family. Sevilla Martin, in 1905, with her husband, went to visit a friend, like a couple. And by the name of Mr. and Mrs. Doolittle. The Doolittles, one of the members of the Doolittle family, had been bedridden for 20 years. Her husband was confined to a wheelchair. Mrs. Doolittle, bedridden. But they managed to get around, they managed to take care of it, and they had a great attitude. And Sevilla asked them, she said, we realize you have great joy, a cheerfulness about you. What is it? And Mrs. Doolittle replied, it was simple. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Well, Sevilla was a poet. And when she went home, she sat down and she wrote the words that became, a gospel favorite. And these are the words. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is he. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Let not your heart be troubled. His tender word I hear, and resting on his goodness, I lose my doubts and fears. Though by the path he leadeth but one step I may see, his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. It's so simple, really. Only one thing keeps us bound by fear, our lack of faith in God. Isn't it time to let go of your fears and trust God? There are some things of which we need to be afraid. But we don't need to be afraid of life. In the subtitle of the Shawshank Redemption, it says, hope sets you free. Fear locks you up. May we trust in God. May we share our offering.